Oh, okay.
She's gonna go around.
Well, I saw your vehicle. I
Oh.
couldn't see you, so I went out into the back.
Okay.
And no one.
You're Elena?
Elena.
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you, Vicki.
We're going to just ask you some questions, and
Oh,
so you can
sure.
just kind of give us your story. This is like,
Sure.
we're going to show this video on Sunday for all three
Wow.
services.
Yeah.
So we're doing a whole festival thing of gathering people that have skills. So
This is amazing.
yeah.
You know, Lois mentioned this to us, and it seemed too good to be true.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you called, it was a shock. Do you want to have? You'll see, it's so dangerous out there for her.
Can you hear?
Our finances are limited, and I'm still trying to pay some of the co-pays from her hospital visit.
Oh.
And I'm new in town. I do body therapy and movement therapy. It's a fabulous process, but it's hard getting started in a new city, though I am getting busier.
That's good.
Yeah. And I actually went out and priced for the wood last spring. And at that time, it was going to be just the wood was about $1,200, and all these co-pays were coming in so strong at that point, and we just couldn't afford it.
Right.
And so I said, Mom, we're just going to have to wait. And I just remember thinking, God willing, she'll survive, because she's out there all the time.
Oh.
In the backyard, because she has flowers, peonies, poppies, and she's watering. We don't have a sprinkler system, so we're doing it by hand. So, and I can't, there's so many gradations that it's just dangerous for her to be walking around by herself, so I have to be there. And but what is amazing, the story is that her father was a large landowner in a village in Russia, and he was such a kind man, and so there were other people who didn't have as much land. He was always taking care of them. They all came and worked for him, and with all the crops. So he was constantly feeding people, and then there was the uprising of the Bolsheviks against the Tsar, and that was the beginning of communism. And so the Bolsheviks, so this is a major revolution, that's when they killed the Tsar and his family, because they were so wealthy and all the rest of the people were going hungry. So when the Bolsheviks came onto their land and discovered that he was a landowner, they immediately whisked him off, because he was an enemy of the people, because he was a landowner, whisked him off to Siberia.
Wow.
And so they never saw him again. My mother still gets hysterical when she thinks of that last day when they took him away. And even though all the rest of the village people were saying, can't you understand that he fed all of us? So he's not an enemy of the people, because he was a landowner. And so they barely, and then he had planted 75 fruit trees, because his daughters were constantly disappearing to their aunt's house about 2 miles away. They were constantly craving fruit. So the father planted 75 fruit trees, and the Bolsheviks started uprooting all the trees. This was just an insane revolution. And the mother, the grandmama, begged them to save them 2 or 3 trees, so they didn't uproot the last 3 trees. And my mother became so upset having that image. So then they barely emotionally began to survive, and now she's 18, and now the Nazis are coming through. And the Nazis were going village to village because they were taking all the farm animals, all the gold and silver to further their war power, all the art, and any young people they could find to haul off on cattle trains back to Germany to work in hard labor camps, 16 to 18 hours a day, hardly any food. Because my mother and her sisters and her mother all had dark hair, the Nazis were insisting that they were Jewish, but they really were not. So the mother was screaming. Did you ever see Sophie's Choice, that movie?
Yes, I did.
Well, the mother was screaming, if you take one, at least take another sister for her. So this is a tearjerker.
No, kid, Sophie's Choice was like awful.
Yeah. So she and her sister were taken away. And so then they never saw their families again. So in the meantime, my mother was in like a hard labor camp for a time, in a concentration camp, because they thought she was Jewish. And she kept insisting that she wasn't. Anyway, she finally wound up in a labor camp. It was still no food and 16 to 18 hours a day labor. These types of people could not go back to Russia because under the Russian government at the time, they said, rather than work for the Germans, you have to kill yourself. So, and of course my mom, well, nobody killed themselves. And so then when the Americans bombed all the camp gates, then one of the camps was hers, and they all went rushing into the forest, trying to get away. I don't know how the Americans bombed so precisely the gates. It's just incredible that nobody was killed, not that I know of anyway, during the bombs. And so then my father, who wasn't, they didn't know each other, he found her under a tree in a catatonic state. She was so terrified from the bombing. And so he took her under his wing, and she says that all the people started digging out holes because the bombings were continuous. And but she was 85 pounds, and she had tuberculosis, and she didn't know it at the time. So then, so now they're refugees. They couldn't go back to Russia, otherwise they'd be sent to Siberia as a punishment for working for the Germans. Does that make sense to you?
It's an incredible story.
It's just a tearjerker. And so somehow now they were in the refugee camps for almost 6 years. I was born in the refugee camp and was 5. We had 5 or 6 different visas. There was a black market on visas because if you were ill or if you had any kind of mark on your record for anything questionable, you could not get a visa because so many people wanted out. And there was a kind of a quota, even from the American government, on visas. So 5 different visas were stolen of ours. My mother kept telling the refugee doctor that would come around every 6 weeks or so that there was something wrong with her. And I even remember one of the last times him saying, "Oh, it's in your head, Fraulein." And if they would have known she had tuberculosis, we could have never entered the United States. And the last time, our last visa, the First Baptist Church down here on 7th and North decided to sponsor a family, a refugee family, because you're penniless. And there was hardly any food in the refugee camp, too, by the way. The Baptist Church on 7th Street sponsored us and brought us to Grand Junction. Yeah.
Wow.
So we
so
got
like
here.
How long ago was that then? When you were
This was
5?
1950. I was 5. And now almost 6, actually. They threw me into 1st grade right there at that Hawthorne school by Hawthorne Park.
Mm-hmm.
And then she collapsed on Main Street 2 months later. Oh, it's a tearjerker. It's just too much, isn't it?
It is.
And so then there was an excellent kidney doctor here. She had tuberculosis of the kidney. He rushed her to the National Jewish Hospital in Denver because it was already a tuberculosis center, the best in the world. And they had to nurse her back to health and put on some weight on her before they could even do a surgery. But she was kept there for a year. And then she was able to come home. And there was me, my sister, I was now going on 6. My sister was 5. My brother was 14 months old. And, oh my God, my father was so depressed. And alone, no family. They just had such a rough time.
Well, God
And
did have his hand on her the whole time.
He had
plans
his
for her.
hand on her. He keeps looking over there, smiling. And so they had it was such a struggle financially because she was always in poor health and the medical bills were just chronically high. So we just remained at poverty level. And I'm going to jump up now to, about 5 years ago, then she had a heart attack, and they discovered her other kidney, her one kidney, was failing. At that point, she went on dialysis. And 2 years ago, because I was just coming here now every 3 to 4 weeks from Evergreen, Colorado, because I could see she was getting worse, and I knew she couldn't continue. I knew something was wrong, and I had a meeting with her doctors at dialysis, and they couldn't quite figure out why she was getting so weak, and every time she had dialysis, she would go incoherent, which now I know is a symptom of a deep infection inside. And what happened is that there was 2 things going on. She had a small diverticuli. You know what that is? It's a pocket in the colon.
Okay.
And sometimes it's common in elderly people. And it was infected, getting ready to burst, but they didn't know it. And at the same time, the tube, which was in her right leg groin, for her dialysis, was robbing the whole leg of blood. So now this whole leg was turning red and purple, and every time I'd come down, I'd say, Mom, and I had a meeting with the doctors, and they said, well, it must be a tiny blood clot behind her knee. But in fact, this whole leg was being robbed of blood. So I very quickly moved, and that month, I had her in the emergency room 11 times. The 12th time, they'd send us home and just say they didn't know what was wrong. And they thought maybe she was getting infected from the leg, and they didn't know what to do with the leg. The leg was turning black. And on the 12th time in the emergency room, her colon burst. So now she went into full-blown sepsis. And that was a tearjerker. She almost died that night. And sepsis kills 300,000 people a year in America alone, even young people. So how she survived,
I don't know what that is.
It's a complete blood infection that is extremely difficult to cure. Even they were flying in an antibiotic from Sweden, trying to, and she was unconscious for months. And I was just praying and praying because I could hear her when she was dreaming. She was praying internally somehow because she was saying, just please let me come home to my yard and my flowers and my birds, because she feeds the birds. And so I was just praying so much for her to come home too. I had little altars set up in my room. And when I got home, I had painted my room, and she said it was all neutral. And I put up the sheets, and she started crying. She says, I just wish the whole house was this neutral. And I said, Mom, I'm going to do the whole house for you. I had a tiny bit of savings. And in the meantime, now she's in the hospital unconscious. So as I was praying, I did the whole house because I knew she was going to come home. That's a tearjerker.
That is.
And I sound like a martyr. I'm embarrassed.
No, it's just you love your mother.
I do.
I mean, that's amazing.
I do.
How long ago was that?
So that was, it was 2 years ago now, February, that was going on. In the meantime, her leg completely died, and there was no more flesh, no more muscle. You could see the tibia. You could see underneath, and she was in so much agony because as a dialysis patient, you can't give them as much morphine as a normal person. You just go a hair too much, and they want to quit breathing. And so there was talk of cutting her leg off, and she somehow heard at that point, and she just screamed out, "Don't you dare cut my leg." And she said, "Try to save it." And so somehow a plastic surgeon got involved, and they put a wound vac on. They seal everything up in sponges and plastic, and the vacuum draws all the blood. And all of a sudden there was tissue around the bone. And so they did a skin graft from her opposite leg, and it was unbelievable. It healed. And she had a colostomy, by the way, that night that her colon burst. But so then finally, it'll be 2 years this July. They sent her home to die. They thought she would survive 10 days. And I knew, they don't know what to do with the elderly in these hospitals. And I think in America, the elderly people frighten, and people are terrified of the symbol of death. I don't know, because I don't know about the care of the elderly in hospitals in this country. Mm-hmm. But they just put her in hospice and sent her home. By the time they sent her home, even though this healed, this tendon, I'm not thinking clearly, the Achilles tendon went necrotic. They removed that, and they said she'll never walk again. And then the whole heel went necrotic. Now there's no muscle or tissue on the heel. And they sent her home, and they just said, "Elena, you will never heal this. We've seen thousands of cases." Now, these were plastic surgeons and the wound team, the director of the wound team at St. Mary's. And she was in so much agony because this was just killing her. And again, I'm trying to balance the morphine doses I can give her, and she's waking me up every 2 hours. The first 8 months that she was here, but I took her off all the medications except the heart and thyroid, replaced it with herbs, God-given herbs, because they have no side effects, and she immediately was 100% more conscious. And because she had been hallucinating on these horrible drugs, and that first week, I just knew she couldn't go on with that kind of pain, and I prayed day and night that first really 10 days, and I had a dream. And in the dream, I was told, put a heating pad on, an hour on, an hour off during the day. And it was just like a doctor-type figure in the dream in a white lab coat. And I just remember thinking, this is the old-time remedies. And her foot was ice cold, and I took to that idea immediately. And 7 days later, the doctor from the wound team came to take the bandage off to look it over. And he just jumped back 3 feet, and he said, pardon my language, he said, "What the hell?" I said, "What?" Because I thought it was worse. And he said, "Where is all this brand new tissue coming from?" And he said, "What have you been doing?" And I said, I had a dream and was told to put a heating pad on. And he says, "Well, you better continue." And in 3 months, the heel was completely healed. And we put her into rehab because she had been flat on her back now for a year and a half to reconnect her brain to her legs. And that was a year ago this January. And now she's just walking around with the walker. When she's exhausted, she's in the wheelchair. And but if you could have just heard her last spring, how bad she wants the deck to cover mud holes and for it to be smooth so she can be more mobile.
Right.
But I'm warning you, it was $1,200 for the wood last spring. It's probably even higher.
Okay. Well, God is in the miracle business. Your mother is proof. I mean, you're proof.
The foot,
don't ever
the
wanna
dream,
limit
I
God.
was so intent. And you know, I begged them for a heating pad in the hospital because she was so ice cold. And I just kept sneaking these blankets, because they have blanket ovens. Over and over, I was sneaking these blankets to her because I was there all the time. And but it wasn't enough. And they says, "Oh, we just can't possibly. That's against the rules here because it could burn them." But if you have it on low to medium, it's impossible to burn someone, and it would have warmed her up. There would have been a healing process right then. It's just crazy what's going on.
Well, your mother is blessed to have you. You know,
She is
really.
so blessed, and she just thanks God. She knows from the Russian days and the Russian Revolution and to now that God has had a hand on her, and she just starts crying in gratitude. And she just says this past year has been the best year of her life. And she has been, she reads the Bible night and day. She's reading philosophy books and wants to discuss the ideas. And sometimes she'll put an idea, like the other day she somehow came across, it was either Plato or Socrates saying, an unexamined life is not worth living. And somehow put that to Jesus's, unless you become as a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God, that there has to be this study of letting go of what's not useful inside of us. Is that amazing?
Oh, I'm going to meet your mother.
You
I have to.
You are going to fall in love with her.
I already have, and I haven't met her. And you're awesome. You just packed up your life in Evergreen.
Yeah.
And came here to
Yeah.
take care of your mom. I mean,
And
not everybody would do that.
yeah. And I fixed up this porch out here. We sit out there and listen to the thunder and watch the lightning and the rain. We can't wait for spring again.
Well, let's go take a gander out here at the back so that people
Yeah.
can get an idea of what we need to have.
Out here to cover. This is so shaded here, we can't grow anything. And then I was going to try to do a walk wide enough for a wheelchair coming out that way.
So she can
Does
go
that-
over and look at her flowers and
Well,
have
she
some
just
mobility,
waters. Yeah, there's flowers, and it would be so fantastic.
And then is this the vegetable garden here, maybe?
That's the vegetable garden. We do cucumbers, tomatoes, and some lettuce back here. So she's just watering. Here it's pretty smooth, so she was able to kind of maneuver her way either in the wheelchair or the walker.
Yeah. What do they know, right?
So this is what I was so afraid to show you. It seems like such a huge job. I almost feel guilty.
Oh, well, you don't ever want to limit God.
Don't
You know,
ever
look at
limit
all
God.
at what he's done in your mother and you right now.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, we're just going to show this to people, and it could be 50 people coming out here doing
It's
this. You just never
unbelievable.
know.
It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is all beautiful in the summer and spring. There's poppies growing. It would be something spectacular for her.
Yeah, and I don't
Do
know.
you think it's possible?
I do think it's absolutely possible. Absolutely. You know, and I'm even thinking, what if it were the deck?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And then either have it come out all the way out here, or maybe have a step or two and then another level. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to get too complicated because I was going to try to do it by myself. God help me.
Well, you know,
Hospice volunteer visitor who comes and visits with her once a week. And when my mom was so semi-conscious the first, 4 or 5 months, Lois would just come and sit, and my mother was semi-comatose, and Lois would just hold her hand.
so do you think that she
So
said something to you about
well,
this?
about 2 or 3 weeks ago, she says, she says, do you mind if I share your story with my church group? And because my church group belongs to something else, and somehow my mother, the week before, brought Lois as far as here and said that she was, I don't know why she brought Lois here for the first time in 2 years. And then the next week, Lois said, well, your mom showed me, I didn't even know it, she says, your mom showed me this mess out here. If you can believe, I put these rocks in here, but it made it not so much worse. It's not as much mud, but it's very dangerous for her.
Yeah.
So really, I made a mess. And so she says, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn your name in. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. And I told Lois, I said, I'm telling you, last year it was $1,200 for wood. And she says, well, Elena, it's possible.
Absolutely.
And then I forgot about it.
Well,
So
what church does she go to?
I don't know.
Because there's, yeah, what ShareFest is.
Lois Lab.
Okay, well, what ShareFest is it's churches in the area. We've invited, I mean, all the churches are invited to join in this. And so, you know, all the churches, then we're out there talking to people and you know, sharing needs, and then we post it on this website. So on April 19th and 20th,
Yeah.
that is when all of the churches are going to come together, shut church down for that days.
She mentioned that. Those days are shut down.
And that's when we all go out and do projects like this.
Well,
We're
honey,
taking church outside of the,
when
the
she
four
told
walls.
me, I just thought, well, how could we be on the list that you'd be all helping church members?
No,
you understand?
yeah, but
So
no,
that's
it's not.
why it just kind of went out of my mind. You know, I mean, to have this kind of support is just.
Yeah, no, it's.
My mom and I are going to get hysterical.
That'll be fun. I want to come when they're doing it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You're going to see my mom.
Well, I
Yeah.
think I'm going to try to come back and see your mom tomorrow if that.
This happens, I'm going to have a little picnic table here.